If you have the character that is the considering character and the pursuing character, that's what we described as being a protagonist. And if you have a character who reconsiders or says we better reconsider and tries to avoid, that's the antagonist. Diagonal, diametrically opposed in each case. Similarly, logic and feeling are diametrically opposed, as well as controlled and uncontrolled. And now you can see that when the Scarecrow and the Tin Man swap their characteristics, Scarecrow is logic, but instead of being controlled, he's uncontrolled. It's important to look at this as four...
Can't tell with green and blue, looks the same.
That's okay then. Four separate quads, they're called. And a quad is one mini family of characteristics. For example, down here in this quad we have faith, disbelief, conscience, and temptation. They're all in a quad that at a larger level is called, what? Morality. Okay? Morality. Faith versus disbelief. Conscience versus temptation. And you can see that the faithful supporter and the disbelieving opposer, that gives you the sidekick and the skeptic. Again, diametrically opposed. Conscientious helper versus the tempting hinderer, that's Obi-Wan Kenobi and Darth Vader. That's the relationship between the guardian and the contagonist. But here in a single family, with faith, conscience, disbelief, and temptation, we can see some interesting relationships. Faith and conscience kind of go together. So even though faith and disbelief are opposites, diametrically opposed, faith and conscience go together. Temptation and disbelief go together. We call in Dramatica, everywhere in the chart, anything that's diagonal, and I have to adjust my picture here so I can see what I'm doing. Anything that is a diagonal, either this way or that way, that is a dynamic pair. A dynamic pair. I saw I had a little room there on the screen, so I'm putting them on that side. I'm going to be right over here on this side too, so we need to cover the whole thing. There we go. Okay. If you have a relationship where they're kind of similar, that always occurs from side to side in one of these groups of four. And that's called a companion pair. And there's two of those in every single quad. And finally, there's the vertical relationship. Faith is in a dependent relationship with temptation, just as conscience is in a dependent relationship with disbelief. Disbelief and conscience kind of, they seesaw between the two of them. Faith and temptation have a little battle, but it's not like faith and disbelief. It's more a dependency. You cannot really have faith unless you're overcoming temptation. Temptation has no real purpose except to be diametrically opposed to conscience by nature. Temptation has no real purpose unless it's trying to undermine faith. And so we have these vertical relationships as well. Now, altogether then, we have three kinds of relationships. And I'm going to erase the other quads we're not looking at right now to talk more about these three kinds of relationships, because I'll give you a little hint. When you determine what kind of character elements you're going to have, by the placement of the character elements, you can determine who's going to be diametrically opposed, who's going to be of a similar nature, sort of amplifying each other, or in a companion relationship, and where the dependencies will be. Now, here's an interesting thing about this. There are two of these relationships of each kind in each quad. Two horizontal, two vertical, two diagonal. One of those relationships will be positive, and the other will be negative. In every quad, there will be a positive dynamic and a negative dynamic. Now, a future version of Dramatica, when we figure out a little more theory, will be able to tell you which relationship is going to be positive and which is negative. But for now, I'll simply define what a positive and negative relationship is. If you have the the diagonal relationships, the ones that are the dynamic pairs, a positive relationship is when two forces smash into each other and create a synthesis. They spark something, sort of like the loyal opposition, where they fight against each other, and that sparks some new idea that wouldn't have happened if they hadn't come into conflict. A negative dynamic relationship is where the two sides conflict, But in conflicting, they simply beat each other into the ground. So you can have a positive kind of conflict and a negative kind of conflict. So if you've only been writing with negative conflict in your story, you've been limiting yourself to half the kinds of conflict that can exist. Similarly, there's a positive and a negative companion relationship. So with faith and disbelief, conscience and temptation, imagine that a positive companion relationship is where you have indirect positive fallout or benefits between the two. And a negative relationship of a companion nature or horizontal nature is when you have a negative influence or fallout or incidental impact on someone else. For example, if you have a positive relationship, maybe, I need to go up here a little bit on the screen, right about here. Suppose that you have your neighbor's house right here, and your house is right there. This is you, this is your neighbor. And suppose out here is the street, and it snows, and you have a walkway that goes like this. If you're shoveling snow, and you come over here and shovel off all the snow here that belongs on your neighbor's walkway that he shares with you, you've had a positive incidental relationship, a positive companion relationship, because you have now done something that helped him, but you never maybe even thought about it. You weren't concerned. You simply did what was important to you, and as a result of your actions, you helped him shovel part of his walk. If you have a negative companion relationship, you still have the same two houses in the same street, but now you've got your neighbor's walk, and you've got your walk, and there's a big wall here next to you. So you can't shovel the snow over that direction, so to get it off your walk, you shovel it off to the left without even thinking about it, and you fill up more snow on your neighbor's walk. You never intended to harm him. You may not have even understood or realized that you did, but by virtue of the course that you've taken, you have done some detriment, some negative impact on your neighbor. That's a negative companion relationship because it's not diametrically opposed, it's incidentally opposed, negative and positive. Now the final relationship is the dependency, the dependent relationship. And those are the vertical lines. And the vertical lines are the ones where you have a positive dependency and a negative. The positive is brain and brawn working together, where you say, I'm okay, you're okay, together we're terrific. It's all on the positive side. A negative dependency is where you say, I'm nothing without my other half. Where you say, with that person, I am nothing. I am dependent upon them because I am incomplete without them. So, on the one side, you say, I am complete, and together we're better. The other one, together we're at least okay, maybe even great, but independently, I'm not good enough by myself. And so you can see that dependencies and the horizontal ones, companion relationships, and the diagonal ones, the dynamic relationships, dynamic because they mostly conflict, this gives you three different kinds of character interactions, and they can all be predicted by this little chart down here. When you look at the big chart, when you look at the big chart with all 64 elements, they're all just a bunch of little quads, 16 different quads of 4 elements each. And by the position of the characters, you can see how they conflict. So, an archetypal character will have the same relationship in each quad where they appear with the other archetypal character. But, if they want to have an archetypal relationship at one level, but in another dimension of character, they might be companions. And in another dimension of character, they might have a dependency. And each of those might be positive or negative. So again, you can see that Dramatica, although it spells things out very specifically and gives you these 64 elements, when it comes to the character interactions, there is an awful lot of variety that you can create. And if you've only been dealing with conflict, whether it's positive or not, and you haven't tried companion relationships to explore in your stories or dependencies, again, you've been limiting yourself an awful lot.